The General's Dilemma. Commander Zargoth, leader of the feared Crimson Phalanx, stood at the edge of the observation deck, his long, scaled fingers gripping the cold metal railing. The holographic battle reports swirled in front of him, each one worse than the last. His deep black eyes narrowed as he studied the data. Losses were mounting. His best soldiers, warriors trained for centuries, were being torn apart by a force they had considered insignificant: humans. The name echoed in his mind like a curse. Humans. Weak. Primitive. A species from a backwater planet called Earth. They had barely entered the galactic stage, yet somehow they had become a thorn in the Empire's side. The Crimson Phalanx had been sent to crush them, to make an example of their insolence. Instead, his forces were crumbling, their proud reputation tarnished. "How is this possible?" Zargoth muttered, his voice low and guttural. He turned to his second-in-command, Colonel Vrax, who stood stiffly at attention nearby. "General," Vrax began, his voice trembling slightly, "the humans, they fight differently. They don't rely on standard formations or predictable strategies. They adapt too quickly. Every time we think we have them cornered, they find a way out." Zargoth's jaw tightened. Adaptation. That was a word he despised. His forces relied on discipline, order, and superior firepower. The idea that chaos could outperform structure was an insult to everything he believed in. The hologram shifted, displaying footage from the latest battle. Zargoth watched as a squad of humans, wearing battered armor and wielding outdated weapons, outmaneuvered his elite troops. They moved like shadows, using the terrain to their advantage, setting traps, and striking with precision. His soldiers fell one by one, their superior numbers meaningless against the humans' relentless assault. One soldier caught Zargoth's attention, a tall, dark-haired human who led the charge with ruthless efficiency. The camera zoomed in as the human planted an explosive device on an Empire tank, diving away just as it erupted in a fiery explosion. The human turned back toward the camera for a brief moment, his face smeared with dirt, his eyes burning with determination. He shouted something in his native tongue. And though Zargoth didn't understand the words, the defiance in his tone was unmistakable. "Who is that?" Zargoth demanded, pointing a clawed finger at the screen. Vrax hesitated before replying. "We believe his name is Aiden Locke. A surgeon, according to intercepted communications. He's been leading several successful skirmishes against our forces." Zargoth growled deep in his throat. "This Aiden Locke. He's no ordinary soldier. He fights like a beast." He slammed a fist onto the console, causing the hologram to flicker. "I want him captured. Alive. Do you hear me?" "Yes, General," Vrax said, bowing his head. "But it won't be easy. The humans protect their own fiercely, and their tactics make them hard to predict." Zargoth waved him off, his mind racing. He needed to understand these humans. What drove them to fight with such ferocity? What gave them the strength to stand against an empire that had crushed countless other species? He had to know their secret. The general turned his attention to the galactic map projected on the main screen. The humans' territory was small, their resources limited. Yet they fought as if they had nothing to lose. No, Zargoth realized. They fought as if they had everything to lose. A quiet chime broke his thoughts. It was an incoming report from the front lines. Zargoth gestured for the officer at the console to open it. The screen filled with the face of an alien lieutenant, his expression pale and shaken. "General Zargoth," the lieutenant stammered. "We've lost another outpost in Sector 7. The humans, they infiltrated our defenses and took out the command center. We didn't even see them coming." Zargoth clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. "How many casualties?" 70% of our forces, sir. The survivors are retreating to the nearest stronghold." 70%. Zargoth's tail lashed angrily behind him. This was unacceptable. The humans were not just an annoyance. They were becoming a genuine threat. If he didn't act decisively, the Empire's entire campaign could be jeopardized. He turned to Vrax. Deploy the Shadow Division. I want them to focus solely on capturing this Surgent Lock and tighten security on our supply lines. The humans' guerrilla tactics rely on cutting off our resources. We cannot allow them to gain the upper hand. Vrax saluted and hurried off to carry out the orders. Zargoth remained on the observation deck, staring out at the swirling void of space. For the first time in his long career, he felt a twinge of doubt. This war was supposed to be a simple conquest, a routine demonstration of the Empire's superiority. But now it was turning into something far more dangerous. As he watched the stars, Zargoth couldn't shake the image of Aiden Locke from his mind. That human had looked into the face of death and laughed. What kind of species could produce warriors like that? What kind of monsters had they underestimated? Zargoth narrowed his eyes. If these humans thought they could outsmart him, they were wrong. He would learn their secrets, break their spirit, and remind the galaxy why the Crimson Phalanx was feared. But deep down, a small voice whispered a chilling thought. What if the humans couldn't be broken? For now, Zargoth silenced that voice. The war was far from over, and he intended to win. But he couldn't deny it. These humans were unlike anything he had ever faced, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit. The human Piodu. The Empire's Shadow Division was ruthless, a specialized unit designed for precision strikes and high-value captures. It was Zargoth's most feared weapon, deployed only in the gravest of situations. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the human stronghold, isolate Sergeant Aiden Locke, and bring him back alive. Failure was not an option. Aiden Locke stood amidst the ruins of an abandoned colony on the planet Excel Prime, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain. He knew the aliens would strike soon. The quiet was too perfect, the air too still. He gripped his pulse rifle tightly, every nerve in his body on edge. Around him, his squad waited, their movements silent and deliberate. They trusted Aiden not just because he was their leader, but because he had an uncanny ability to sense danger before it struck. "Something's coming," Aiden muttered, his voice barely audible. His second in command, Private Torres, crouched beside him. "Shadow Division?" she asked, her tone grim. "Probably," Aiden replied, "but they'll have to earn it." As if on cue, a sudden explosion rocked the ground. Alien drones swooped in from the skies, their sleek, black forms glinting in the dim light. Plasma bolts rained down, forcing the humans into cover. Aiden barked orders, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos. "Fall back to the ridge. Use the narrow pass to bottleneck them." The humans moved with practiced efficiency, retreating while laying down suppressing fire. But the Shadow Division wasn't ordinary. They anticipated the humans' movements, flanking them with precision strikes. One by one, Aiden's squad was picked off, not killed but incapacitated with stunning rounds. They weren't after blood. They were after him. Aiden realized the truth too late. The retreat had been a trap, a carefully orchestrated maneuver to isolate him. He spun around to cover his squad's retreat, only to find himself face to face with 3 shadow operatives. Their exosuits shimmered with cloaking technology, making them almost invisible. Aiden's reflexes kicked in, and he fired. His shots landed true, taking down 2 of them, but the third moved with inhuman speed, disarming him in seconds. A pulse of energy struck Aiden in the chest, and he fell to his knees, gasping for air. The alien operative loomed over him, speaking in a guttural tone. Target acquired. Aiden awoke in a dark, sterile room. The air was cold, the walls humming with a faint energy field. He was restrained, his arms bound behind him in cuffs that neutralized his strength. Across the room, a tall figure stepped into view, Commander Zargoth. "So," Zargoth began, his voice laced with both curiosity and disdain, "this is the infamous Sergeant Aiden Locke, the human who has caused my forces so much trouble." Aiden glared at him, his expression defiant. "Glad to know I've made an impression." Zargoth chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Impression. You've embarrassed my troops, sabotaged my operations, and turned this war into a spectacle. But that ends now. You will tell me everything I want to know. How does your species fight like this? What makes you so resilient? Aiden smirked. You think I'm just going to spill all our secrets because you ask nicely? Zargoth leaned closer, his reptilian features inches from Aiden's face. Oh, you'll talk, human. Everyone talks eventually. The interrogation began, but it was unlike anything Aiden had faced before. Alien scientists entered the room, armed with strange devices that probed his mind, searching for memories, strategies, and weaknesses. Aiden fought to resist, his mental discipline honed from years of training. Still, the aliens were relentless, pushing deeper into his psyche. What are you hiding, human? Zargoth demanded after hours of silence. No species fights like yours. No species sacrifices so much for so little gain. Tell me, what drives you? Aiden lifted his head, his voice hoarse but steady. You wouldn't understand. It's not about the fight. It's about what we're fighting for. Zargoth's eyes narrowed. Enlighten me. Aiden's lips curled into a faint smile. We fight for each other. For the people back home who can't. For the freedom to live on our terms. And for the simple fact that no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to take that away. The room fell silent. For a moment, even Zargoth seemed taken aback by the conviction in Aiden's voice. He turned to his scientists. Increase the intensity. I want answers. The machines whirred louder, and Aiden's mind was flooded with images, his squad, his home, his battles. But beneath the surface, he felt something else, a burning determination not to break. Days passed, and the interrogations continued, but Aiden remained unyielding. Zargoth grew increasingly frustrated. The human wasn't just enduring. He was defying. Even in chains, Aiden radiated a strength that unnerved the alien general. One day, as Zargoth reviewed the latest report, one of his scientists approached him. General, we've extracted fragments of data, but nothing useful. His mind is different. It's not just discipline. There's something deeper, something primal. What do you mean? Zargoth demanded. The scientist hesitated. It's as if humans are built for this, for survival, for war. They adapt, endure, and thrive where others would crumble. It's not natural. Zargoth stared at the hologram of Aiden, who sat in his cell, battered but unbroken. For the first time, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if humanity's strength wasn't a fluke? What if they were, by design, the galaxy's most dangerous species? As Zargoth turned away, he resolved to break Aiden, no matter the cost. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this human might be unbreakable. A taste of humanity's tactics. The cold expanse of the battlefield was eerily quiet. Smoke curled from charred ground vehicles, and the distant hum of alien drones filled the air like a predator circling its prey. Aiden Locke's capture had shaken his squad, but the humans weren't defeated. They were angry. And humans angry were a force to be reckoned with. Lieutenant Sarah Quinn had taken command in Aiden's absence. She stood atop a ridge, her sharp eyes scanning the terrain below. She knew the Shadow Division would return, likely emboldened by their success in capturing Aiden. But this time, she wasn't waiting for them. She was going to make them regret every step they took. Everyone, listen up, Quinn said, her voice carrying through the comms. We're not retreating this time. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Aiden wouldn't sit back and wait for a miracle, and neither will we. Her squad responded with grim determination. Each soldier was battle-worn, their armor scratched and scorched, but their eyes burned with defiance. Aiden had taught them well. Never give up ground unless it's to take more later. In orbit, Commander Zargoth studied the battlefield from his flagship. The humans had regrouped near a defensible position, but their numbers were dwindling. It was only a matter of time before the Empire's forces crushed them. Zargoth's lips curled into a predatory grin as he gave the order. Send in the heavy artillery. No more subtlety. We'll wipe them out completely. Plasma cannons fired from orbit, and waves of drones descended upon the humans' position. The ground trembled as alien tanks rolled forward, their hulking forms bristling with weaponry. To any observer, it looked like overkill. But Zargoth had learned one thing about humans. They were never as weak as they appeared. The first wave of alien drones met an unexpected resistance. Quinn's squad had laid a series of traps, using makeshift explosives crafted from salvaged materials. The drones' sleek forms were torn apart mid-flight, their remains crashing to the ground in a cascade of sparks and fire. From the ridge, the humans launched an ambush. They used smoke grenades to obscure their movements, darting between cover and picking off alien soldiers with precision. Plasma rifles hummed as they fired in controlled bursts, each shot finding its mark. The humans weren't just fighting. They were hunting. Quinn watched as her team executed the plan flawlessly. She could almost hear Aiden's voice in her head, reminding her of their training. Turn their strength into their weakness. Make them think they're in control until it's too late. The second wave arrived, this time with tanks. The massive vehicles lumbered forward, their cannons firing indiscriminately. Quinn's heart raced, but she stayed focused. Deploy the EMPs, she ordered. A series of small devices, no larger than a fist, were hurled toward the tanks. They detonated in a burst of energy, disabling the vehicle systems. The tanks ground to a halt, their drivers scrambling to figure out what had gone wrong. That's when the humans struck again, using anti-armor rounds to take out the immobilized vehicles. In the flagship, Zargoth watched the carnage unfold with mounting frustration. His forces were superior in every way: technology, numbers, firepower, but the humans fought as if none of that mattered. They turned the battlefield into their playground, using cunning and creativity to outmaneuver his troops. "General," one of his officers reported nervously, "we're losing ground. Their tactics are unconventional. We can't predict their movements." Zargoth slammed a clawed hand on the console, then stopped trying to predict them. Overwhelm them with force. But deep down, Zargoth knew it wasn't that simple. The humans didn't rely on brute strength. They fought with an intensity that bordered on madness, as if they thrived in the chaos of war. He couldn't understand it. What kind of species fought like this? On the ground, Quinn's squad was making progress, but they knew they couldn't hold out forever. Reinforcements were coming, and the Empire's forces would soon overwhelm them. That's when Quinn made the bold decision. "All right, team," she said, gathering her squad around her. "We're not just going to survive this. We're going to send them a message. Pack up the gear. We're going after the flagship." The squad exchanged uncertain glances, but no one argued. They trusted Quinn, just as they had trusted Aiden. If she said they could take down the enemy's command ship, then that's exactly what they were going to do. Using stolen alien tech, they hacked into a drone and used it to infiltrate the Empire's supply lines. Disguised as part of the fleet, they hitched a ride to the flagship, slipping past security unnoticed. The plan was audacious, reckless, and borderline suicidal. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan Aiden would have come up with. Inside the flagship, Zargoth was focused on the ground battle, oblivious to the threat creeping aboard his own ship. Quinn and her squad moved like shadows, disabling security systems and planting charges in key locations. Their goal wasn't just to cause chaos, it was to strike fear into the heart of the Empire. As the humans reached the command center, Zargoth finally realized what was happening. Alarms blared as the humans revealed themselves, their weapons trained on the alien officers. Quinn stepped forward, her voice calm but full of authority. "Commander Zargoth," she said, "this is your only warning. Leave our planet and never come back. Because if you don't, we'll make sure the galaxy remembers what humans can do." Zargoth stared at her, a mixture of anger and disbelief in his eyes. He had underestimated these humans, and now he was paying the price. But he wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. The beast within. The command center erupted into chaos. Alien officers scrambled for cover as Quinn's squad opened fire, targeting critical systems to sow confusion. Plasma bolts lit the room in bursts of green and blue, reflecting off the sleek, metallic walls. Commander Zargoth roared, his tail lashing behind him as he ordered reinforcements to the bridge. But the humans weren't fighting to hold the command center. They were fighting to send a message. Quinn's sharp eyes darted to her squadmates as she barked orders. Plant the charges and fall back. We're not here to win a standoff. Private Torres nodded, her hands moving with practiced precision as she armed the last of the explosives. The humans had one goal: to cripple the flagship's command systems and retreat before they could be overwhelmed. It wasn't about brute force, it was about precision. Zargoth watched the humans with a mix of rage and fascination. They moved with a strange blend of discipline and unpredictability, each soldier seeming to act independently yet perfectly in sync with the others. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. These weren't just warriors. They were something else entirely. Focus fire on the leader, Zargoth bellowed, pointing a clawed finger at Quinn. If he could take her down, perhaps the others would falter. But Quinn was already moving, darting behind a console as plasma bolts scorched the air where she had just been. She fired back, her shots precise, buying just enough time for Torres to finish her work. Charges set, Torres shouted. We need to move. Quinn nodded, gesturing for the squad to retreat. Fall back to the hangar. Go. The humans began their retreat, laying down suppressing fire as they moved. Zargoth's reinforcements poured into the command center, filling the room with alien soldiers in gleaming armor. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, but they didn't hesitate. As they reached the corridor leading to the hangar, Quinn detonated the charges. The entire ship shuddered as explosions rippled through the command center, disabling critical systems. Lights flickered, and alarms blared as smoke filled the air. In the chaos, Zargoth staggered to his feet. The humans had escaped the command center, but he wasn't going to let them get away. Seal off the hangar, he roared. Don't let them reach their ship. But Quinn had anticipated this. The humans weren't heading for their own ship. They were heading for the auxiliary drone bay. Using stolen alien tech, they hacked into the ship's automated systems, reprogramming a fleet of maintenance drones to create a diversion. As the drones activated, they swarmed through the corridors, attacking anything that moved. Alien soldiers found themselves fighting not just the humans but their own machines. It was chaos, and the humans thrived in it. Zargoth stormed into the drone bay, his frustration boiling over. The humans were nowhere to be seen, but the signs of their presence were unmistakable. Disabled security systems, sabotage drones, and a trail of destruction leading deeper into the ship. They're not running, Zargoth realized, his eyes narrowing. They're hunting. In the shadows of the drone bay, Quinn and her squad watched as the alien forces scrambled. They had split into smaller teams, using the ship's labyrinthine corridors to their advantage. Every move they made was calculated to sow confusion and fear. Do you see it now? Quinn whispered, her voice carrying through the comms. They think they're the predators, but they don't realize they're the prey. As the humans advanced, they planted more charges, each one strategically placed to disable key systems. The ship's power flickered as the humans targeted its reactor core, forcing the Empire's engineers into a desperate race to keep it functional. Zargoth finally cornered Quinn in a storage bay, his massive frame blocking the only exit. His soldiers surrounded her, their weapons trained on her squad. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the ship's failing systems. You've done enough damage, human, Zargoth growled, his voice low and menacing. Surrender now, and I might spare your lives. Quinn's lips curled into a smirk. You don't get it, do you? We're not here to survive. We're here to make sure you don't forget us. With that, she pressed a button on her wrist device. The charges throughout the ship detonated, one after another, sending shockwaves rippling through the vessel. The lights went out completely, plunging the ship into darkness. In the chaos, Quinn and her squad slipped away, using the confusion to reach an escape pod. As they launched from the flagship, they watched the massive vessel crippled, its once imposing form now limping through space. Inside the escape pod, Torres turned to Quinn. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Quinn's expression hardened. "Oh, they'll come, but they won't be the same when they do. We've shown them what humans can do. And that's just the beginning." On the flagship, Zargoth stood amidst the wreckage of his command center. His officers were scrambling to restore order, but the damage was done. The humans had outwitted him at every turn, and now his forces were left licking their wounds. As Zargoth stared out at the void of space, he clenched his fists. These humans weren't just fighters, they were something far more dangerous, and for the first time in his career, he felt a pang of doubt. Could the Empire truly conquer a species like this? The general turned to his officers, his voice cold and determined. "Prepare the fleet. If they want to fight like beasts, we'll hunt them like beasts. This isn't over." But deep down, Zargoth knew it wasn't just a fight he was facing. It was a force of nature, and it terrified him. Humanity's dark past. The silence in the escape pod was deafening, broken only by the hum of its propulsion system as it hurtled through space. Quinn leaned back against the cold metal wall, her breathing steady despite the chaos they had just escaped. The squad sat in the dim light, bruised and battered but alive. Private Torres glanced at her nervously. "Lieutenant," she began hesitantly, "do you think we've pushed them too far? Zargoth won't stop after this." Quinn gave a dry chuckle, her eyes distant. "Good. Let them come. We've been dealing with monsters like him for centuries." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The squad exchanged uneasy glances, their curiosity piqued. Private Jansen, the youngest among them, finally broke the silence. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "Centuries of dealing with monsters." Quinn's expression darkened. She looked out the small viewport, where the crippled alien flagship loomed in the distance. Her voice was quiet but laced with a bitter edge. "Do you think this is the first time humanity has faced extinction? No. The only difference now is that the threat comes from out there," she said, nodding toward the void. "But we've fought wars far worse, against ourselves." Meanwhile, aboard the damaged flagship, Zargoth stood in a darkened strategy room. The holographic displays flickered, and the air was thick with smoke from damaged systems. His scientists and officers scrambled to repair the ship's functionality, but Zargoth's focus was elsewhere. He studied a glowing hologram of Earth, spinning slowly before him. What kind of species survives its own destruction over and over again? Zargoth muttered to himself. The answer eluded him, and it infuriated him. Humans were not the most advanced species he had encountered, nor the strongest. Yet they had crippled his fleet with ingenuity and sheer willpower. He needed answers. "Bring the prisoner," he growled. Aiden Locke, still restrained but unbroken, was dragged into the room. He looked worse for wear, bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, but his defiance remained untouched. He met Zargoth's gaze with a smirk that only deepened the general's frustration. "You've been a thorn in my side since this war began," Zargoth said, his voice low and menacing. "But it's not your tactics that intrigue me, human. It's your persistence. How does a species so fragile become so dangerous?" Aiden raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his restraints. "You want the truth?" he asked, his voice hoarse but steady. "It's simple. Humans don't break. We bend, we adapt, we endure, but we don't break." Zargoth scoffed. "A poetic answer, but it doesn't explain your capacity for war. Your history is littered with conflicts, genocide, and destruction. How does a species survive such self-inflicted wounds?" Aiden's smirk faded. His gaze turned cold, and his voice dropped to a chilling monotone. We survived because we had to. Do you know what it's like to live on a planet that tries to kill you every day? Earth isn't a paradise. It's a crucible. Hurricanes, earthquakes, plagues, predators. We faced them all. And when nature wasn't enough, we fought each other. For power, for survival, for the sheer stupidity of it. Zargoth's tail flicked behind him, his curiosity mingling with unease. And yet here you are. You call yourselves civilized now, but I see the beast lurking beneath the surface. You revel in destruction. Aiden's eyes burned with intensity. You think we enjoy this? He snapped. You think we want war? You don't understand. Every battle we fight, every life we lose, it's a scar, and we carry those scars with us. They make us stronger, sure, but they also remind us of what we've lost. So don't you dare stand there and lecture me about reveling in destruction. The room fell silent. Zargoth stared at Aiden, his mind racing. For the first time, he saw something beyond defiance in the human's eyes, something ancient, primal, and unyielding. Back in the escape pod, Quinn continued her story, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet intensity. Before the stars, we fought each other. Nations rose and fell. Billions died in wars over land, resources, and ideology. It was brutal, but it forged us. It taught us to survive anything. And now, here we are, fighting again, not because we want to, but because we have to. Jansen looked at her, wide-eyed. But if we're so good at surviving, why didn't we stop fighting? Quinn's expression softened, because surviving isn't the same as living. That's the part we're still figuring out. As the escape pod entered the orbit of a nearby human-controlled planet, the squad prepared for the next phase of their mission. They knew the Empire wouldn't rest after the damage they had inflicted. Reinforcements would come, and the war would escalate. But they weren't afraid. They had something the Empire couldn't understand: a relentless drive to protect their own. Aboard the flagship, Zargoth stood alone in the darkened strategy room, staring at the hologram of Earth. Aiden's words echoed in his mind. Humans don't break. For the first time, Zargoth felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in centuries: doubt. He had underestimated humanity, thinking them fragile and primitive. But now he saw the truth. Humans weren't just survivors. They were a force of nature, forged in a crucible of adversity. As Zargoth clenched his fists, he made a vow. He would find a way to break these humans. He had to, because if he didn't, they might just break him. The turning point. The human-controlled planet Quinn's squad had landed on was a remote outpost, a rugged frontier world called Haven. It wasn't much: a few scattered settlements, some mining operations, and a single makeshift command center. But it was their refuge for now. Haven's surface was a hostile landscape of jagged mountains and turbulent storms, but to the squad, it felt like a fortress. Quinn wasted no time. The moment they landed, she gathered her team and the local militia. The Empire won't take this lightly, she told them, her tone commanding. They'll be here soon, and they'll come with everything they have. But we've got something they don't: us. The militia was a ragtag group of miners, farmers, and engineers, none of whom had seen combat on the scale the Empire brought. Fear flickered in their eyes, but Quinn's unwavering determination was contagious. She outlined a plan, leveraging the terrain and the outpost's limited resources to prepare for the inevitable onslaught. Meanwhile, aboard the damaged flagship, Commander Zargoth was orchestrating his next move. His pride had taken a devastating blow, and he was determined to reclaim it. Reports from his officers confirmed the humans escaped to Haven, and Zargoth saw an opportunity. If he crushed them there, he could turn the tide of the war back in his favor. Mobilize the fleet, Zargoth ordered. This time, we're not holding back. I want that planet reduced to ashes. But as the fleet prepared for departure, whispers of doubt began to spread among Zargoth's officers. The humans had demonstrated something terrifying: a willingness to fight with no regard for the odds. It was as if they thrived in impossible situations, and that unnerved even the most hardened warriors. The storm clouds above Haven churned as Zargoth's fleet emerged from hyperspace. Dozens of massive warships hovered ominously in the sky, their weapon systems glowing with energy. On the ground, Quinn watched through binoculars as the first dropships began their descent. "They're here," Torres said, gripping her rifle tightly. Quinn nodded, her face a mask of calm. "Good. Let's show them what Haven is made of." The humans had transformed the outpost into a death trap. Mines were buried along key approaches, improvised artillery had been constructed from mining equipment, and choke points were reinforced with barricades. Every settler and soldier was armed and ready, their resolve unshakable. The first wave of alien troops landed with precision, deploying in tight formations as they advanced on the human defenses. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, lighting up the storm-darkened sky. But the humans held their ground, using the terrain to their advantage. Snipers picked off officers, while explosive traps decimated entire squads. Zargoth watched from his flagship, his frustration mounting as the battle dragged on. The humans weren't just holding their own. They were winning. He slammed a clawed fist on the console, barking orders. "Deploy the shock troops. End this now." The shock troops, genetically enhanced warriors bred for close combat, descended on the battlefield, their massive forms cutting through human defenses with brutal efficiency. For a moment, it seemed like the tide was turning. But then the humans adapted. Quinn's squad led a daring counterattack, targeting the shock troops with precision strikes. Using hit-and-run tactics, they drew the behemoths into traps, isolating and neutralizing them one by one. As the battle raged, Zargoth began to see the truth. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to send a message. Every move they made, every sacrifice, was a statement of defiance. And that defiance was infectious. Even Zargoth's own soldiers, seeing the humans' unyielding determination, began to falter. In a desperate bid to regain control, Zargoth ordered an orbital bombardment. The skies lit up as energy beams rained down on Haven, reducing entire sections of the outpost to rubble. But the humans refused to break. They retreated into the mountains, continuing their resistance from hidden strongholds. In one of those strongholds, Quinn gathered her remaining forces. The losses had been heavy, but her spirit was unbroken. She looked at her squad, her voice firm. "They think they can scare us into submission. They think they can crush us with their machines and their numbers. But they don't understand what we're fighting for." Torres, her face smudged with dirt, nodded. "For Haven." Quinn shook her head. "For something bigger. For every colony, every family, every person who dreams of a life free from their tyranny. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for a future." As the human resistance intensified, cracks began to form in the Empire's assault. Zargoth's officers reported dwindling morale and mounting casualties. Even the general himself couldn't deny the growing realization. The humans weren't just warriors. They were symbols. And symbols were far harder to destroy than armies. Desperation drove Zargoth to take a bold risk. He decided to confront the humans personally, leading a ground assault to crush their resistance once and for all. As his dropship descended onto the battlefield, he prepared for a final showdown with the species that had defied him at every turn. The General's Awakening. The battlefield was eerily silent as Commander Zargoth stepped out of his dropship. His imposing figure cast a long shadow across the charred ground, his armor gleaming under the storm-lit sky. Behind him, his elite guard fanned out, their weapons ready. Before him, on a ridge carved by centuries of wind and rain, stood Lieutenant Quinn. Her rifle was slung across her back, her posture relaxed but deliberate. She wasn't hiding, wasn't running. She was waiting, and that more than anything unnerved Zargoth. This human, outnumbered, outgunned, and battered, radiated a calm defiance that seemed to mock the overwhelming might of the Empire. Zargoth motioned his troops to halt, stepping forward alone. He raised his voice, its deep timber cutting through the howling wind. "You've fought well, human. Better than I expected. But this ends now. Surrender, and I may show you mercy." Quinn tilted her head, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Mercy," she echoed, her tone dripping with disdain. "From the empire that destroys worlds and enslaves entire species. No, Commander. Mercy isn't in your vocabulary." Zargoth narrowed his eyes. "You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. It's a warning. Your resistance is admirable, but futile. You cannot win." Quinn stepped closer, her boots crunching on the rocky ground. "Maybe we can't win, not the way you think. But we're not fighting just for victory. We're fighting to remind you, and everyone else in the galaxy, what it means to stand for something greater than yourself." Her words struck a nerve. Zargoth's tail lashed behind him, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. The humans weren't just defying him. They were challenging everything he believed about power and control. He shook it off, raising his weapon. "Enough talk," he growled. "If you won't surrender, I'll end this myself." The battle began with a deafening roar. Zargoth charged, his plasma blade igniting in a flash of searing blue. Quinn ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the strike. Her squad, hidden in the ridges, opened fire, forcing Zargoth's guard to scramble for cover. But Zargoth wasn't deterred. He pressed forward, his movements swift and brutal. Quinn fired her rifle, the rounds sparking off his armor as she darted between cover. Each strike of Zargoth's blade came closer, each swing more calculated. It was a dance of death, a battle of predator and prey. Yet Quinn never faltered. Above the battlefield, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the chaos below as human resistance fighters clashed with Zargoth's elite guard. The sound of plasma bolts and explosions echoed through the valley. But amidst the chaos, Quinn and Zargoth remained locked in their deadly duel. "You fight well, human," Zargoth admitted, his voice strained. "But skill won't save you." Quinn smirked, her breath heavy but steady. "Maybe not, but determination will." As the fight raged, Zargoth began to feel something unfamiliar: weariness. The human's resilience wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Every strike he landed, every tactic he employed, was met with unrelenting resistance. It was as if Quinn's willpower alone was keeping her alive. Finally, Zargoth managed to disarm her, knocking her rifle to the ground. He raised his blade for the finishing blow, but Quinn didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "You think killing me will end this?" she asked. "Look around, Zargoth. You've already lost." Zargoth hesitated. He turned his head, and for the first time, he truly saw the battlefield. His troops were faltering, their lines broken by human resistance fighters who fought as if they had nothing to lose. His flagship, visible in the distance, was crippled, its systems failing under relentless sabotage. Even his elite guard, the pride of the Empire, were retreating. In that moment, something inside Zargoth shifted. He lowered his blade, his gaze heavy. "What drives you, human? Why do you fight like this?" Quinn's expression softened, her voice quiet but firm. "Because we've lived through worse. Because we know what's at stake. And because we've learned that some things are worth fighting for, even if it costs us everything." Zargoth stared at her, his mind racing. He had seen countless battles, conquered countless worlds, but he had never faced an enemy like this. The humans weren't just warriors. They were survivors. And their fight wasn't about power or conquest. It was about something far more dangerous: hope. The battle ended not with a victory, but with a realization. Zargoth called for a ceasefire, his voice echoing across the battlefield. His troops, battered and demoralized, obeyed without question. The humans, wary but resolute, held their ground. As Zargoth stood amidst the ruins, he turned to Quinn. "You've won this battle, human, but this war isn't over." Quinn nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "It never is. But maybe you'll think twice before you come for us again. Zargoth returned to his dropship, his mind heavy with thoughts of what he had witnessed. As the ship ascended into the stormy sky, he couldn't shake the image of Quinn standing on the ridge, her defiance unbroken. For the first time in his life, Zargoth felt something he couldn't explain: respect. Back on Haven, the humans began to rebuild. The scars of the battle were deep, but their spirit remained unshaken. Quinn stood with her squad, looking out at the horizon as the storm began to clear. "They'll be back," Torres said quietly. Quinn nodded. "Maybe. But next time, they'll know what they're up against." The story ends with a final shot of the humans standing together, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. The Empire may have had the numbers, the technology, and the firepower, but humanity had something far more powerful: the unyielding will to fight for a better future. And that, Quinn knew, was something the galaxy would never forget.